Dr. Scott Mandelker is an expert on the law of one material, and in our first interview we covered the basics of the law of one and how that pertains to life. And in this interview we are going to continue our discussion looking at the history of our solar system and how the law of one pertains to different extraterrestrial civilizations and secret space programs.
You're listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla, your source for the uncensored truth regarding the human, extraterrestrial, global, and political agenda. Click the like button and subscribe to this channel. And now, here's Dr. Michael Salla.
Well, welcome, Scott, back to the show.
Greetings. Thanks for having me back again.
Well, I think last time we kind of covered the basics of the law of one material for those that are unfamiliar with it. So this time I thought we could just go into the history of the solar system from the perspective of the law of one and how life on Earth evolved in terms of other planets that were populated at some point.
Sure. This is, solar system cosmology, sort of history of the neighborhood. And it's actually very important, I think, in understanding human consciousness today, or the world civilization as we see it today. The beginning they trace for the solar system is back to the planet Maldek, which is in the Alice Bailey material called Marduk. And Sumerian texts, talk about that. In the Bailey material, the idea is that Maldek was exceedingly evil. I mean, the worst of the worst kind of atrocity as normative there. Ra's perspective is, they said something like, 700,000 years ago, Maldek blew up its planet, or 500,000, I forgot the number. And basically were in warfare for thousands of years, blew up the planet, it became the asteroid belt, they say, between Mars and Saturn, I guess. And then, what's that?
Mars and Jupiter.
Mars and Jupiter. And yeah, Mars and Saturn, maybe not too close. And so the population, because of the trauma, went into what Ra calls a knot of fear, K-N-O-T, a knot of fear on astral planes or non-physical levels of third density of that planet, right? So blowing up a planet doesn't mean you destroy all the energy fields. They went into this knot of fear, and after a few hundred thousand years, other Confederation member groups were able to reach them through a kind of astral coma, which is very common actually for people who are violent suicides, and a certain kind of sudden death is a kind of coma on the other side. You've seen that in some other traditions. They were contacted through their fear, and the plan was made to incarnate some or many on planet Earth. They actually inhabited what Ra calls one type of the Bigfoot body. So one type of the Bigfoot body means they went into the advanced, what Ra calls second density animal forms of the time, which was, over 100,000 years ago. Then they've been steadily getting out of those animal body forms. In Buddhism, Hinduism, of course, with notion of reincarnation, there is an idea that souls can fall, humans can fall by sin or evil to an animal state, rebirth. My sense is it's extremely rare, but from Ra's case, they're saying that the Maldek group traumatized themselves to that degree, and then went into advanced animal forms, certain type of gorilla, with some kind of telepathic power. Sometimes, actually, they had some of them could develop certain powers because they're basically human souls in animal bodies and working through serious trauma. That could be pegged as the origin point of traumatic experience in the solar system. Ra made a direct comment, and I've given a couple of talks on this, that they said something like, A large percentage of all progression among your peoples goes by way of traumatic catalyst. Traumatic catalyst just means sort of the raw experience that comes to us, of events and people, situations, thoughts and feelings, sensations, body conditions. Any experience really of body or mind is given that term catalyst because, the purpose of existence, right, is to soul evolution, right? They said the original desire is that entities seek and become one. And maybe in a future talk, we'll talk more about soul evolution, as the heart of the raw material, not cosmology, and not talking about wanderers even. But a large percentage of all progression among your peoples goes by way of traumatic catalyst. I think that's very true. And what I see is that people make the same behavioral decisions and get hurt again and again, hurt themselves and hurt people around them again and again. Maldek souls then, I don't know how many or all, came to Earth, were in these Bigfoot bodies. And when the third density cycle began on Earth, again, this is just, from the raw material, and there are other perspectives, and they should be compared. The human cycle began 75,000 years ago. It's composed of three, what astronomical would call a precession of the equinox, about a 25,000 year cycle. Earth going around the 12 signs of the zodiac. It's not astrology, it's astronomy, the movement of the solar system and the other star systems around our solar system. Three of those 25,000 years periods equals one 75,000 year 3D cycle. And again, their phrase was something like planets offering progressive cycles for experiential use, meaning for the use of beings like plants and animals and humans and non-human angelics to have experience and do soul evolution. And so the Maldek Bigfoot gorilla inhabiting body people then became part of the rootstock of the beginning of the 3D cycle Earth human population 75,000 years ago. Ross said, if I remember, 50% Martian, 25% Maldek, and 25% native to the planet. It happens that some advanced animals who have real personality and a sense of self can graduate and become human. That's the way it goes in their cosmology or the metaphysics of evolution. So Mars also blew itself up and blew off its atmosphere, and of course there was a civilization there. So a couple of takeaways I think are germane, aside from the detail. This is a solar system of great violent destructiveness. I would assume, whether you want to call it, whatever you want to call the negative grouping, in the raw material is the Orion Federation, which is mainly fourth density negative groups and some 5D negative adepts, and then their proxy humans that follow them on Earth. They had great sway on Maldek. They had great sway on Mars. They have great sway here today. And that's one reason why there's a great deal of traumatic catalyst on this planet or through the entirety of human history. My sense is that humanity has been at war around the planet in different hotspots for the last 15,000 years. We get into all those questions, so I'll just kind of cover them freely. Ra indicates that Atlantis was indeed a first agrarian and then somewhat highly technological civilization that blew itself up with high energy weaponry around something like 12,000, 11,000 years ago. Now, that might have been the biblical deluge. There may have been a deluge later than that as well. I'm not sure. They don't talk about that too much. But Atlantis, too, was a violent, destructive collective. So we've come to a very special planet. For wanderers or for souls who know that they're strangers in a strange land, it's very important to remember or to consider that before we came, we did know what we were getting into. It's just that now we've forgotten what we knew before coming in. And so this is an outlier planet in the sense of its consciousness in third density, the human consciousness. Ra had indicated that not only from Mars and Maldek, but also from about a dozen other 3D cycled planets come the Earth, the root stock population, or the constitution of Earth humanity. But these are planets that are both positively oriented 3D, negatively oriented 3D, very advanced technologically, very primitive, so-called technologically, positive, negative, all the way in, all across the spectrum, which is very interesting. And they say that that's extremely rare also in the galaxy for a 3D cycle to be such a composite of multiple origin 3D native souls. So you've got some very, the God or logos or the creator of the situation, right? Because the raw material doesn't use the term God, they would use the term intelligent infinity or the one infinite creator. That ultimately one infinite creator in the form of logos, which is, the Greek term for the word. In the beginning was the logos and let there be light. The logos is working out some very special, very unusual karma. It's an unusual case, this planet, this 3D cycle. Not only are there souls from many different groups that don't necessarily get along so well, or at different levels of mental development. Some being very love over wisdom, some very mental, wisdom over love, some older, some younger. And then in a solar system where Orion or negativity has had great influence for 1 million years, basically. And so understand, that humanity has been struggling or at war with itself so consistently for many millennia, is then, to me, not so surprising. It's unpleasant, but it isn't surprising given the composition of the group and the history of the solar system. And I can only understand that there's some kind of working of karma and polarity, positive, negative, and some kind of special working going on in the solar system. Personally, I think it's very possible that after dimensional shift or the new age or Earth goes to fourth density, positive, because there are many more harvestable positive than negative in their view, which means more goodly than evil here. Even though, negativity has power and money and, very, very active, the number of people who are positively oriented and very, moderately or somewhat significantly heart-centered is far greater than those that are negative of harvestable quality. So it gets very technical, because we're talking about, planets as schools, planet as a school for souls to learn or develop in consciousness, particularly in association with the chakras, with the chakra consciousness. So third density correlates to third chakra, and that relates to the third ray or of the 7 rays. So 7 is, the typical metaphysical number there. And so third density, the physical, above the animals, which have consciousness but not full self-consciousness. So third density as a dimension of choice. Density, dimension, those are interchangeable terms. So 3D as a dimension of choice and choosing one's moral path, with love, without love, win-win or win-lose, all for one and one for all, or me against all, which is the negative path, serves the self, which is control and domination. I would just say that there's an inordinate amount of negativity in this 3D cycle on this planet because of the history of the solar system, because of the logoic decision to have, to let both somewhat spiritually apathetic, spiritually indifferent souls, a certain kind of apathy to their own inner life, to put them together with negativity, 3D souls that are on the negative path and Orion guiding them. at this time, during this cycle. And for the wanderers, many of us who feel great angst and grief at humanity and the injustice and the dishonesty and the pain and the atrocity and the bloodshed, and the endless troubles that are given to people, need to remember that we came to a very unusual, highly distorted group that serves a very particular kind of function or purpose for Logos in galactic evolution. So there's a book, The Only Planet of Free Choice or Free Will, right? Either, that's a direct contradiction. So either Earth is the only planet of free will or not. In my understanding, free will is a universal, and it's not only on planet Earth. So I would imagine that Logos is working through some very special issues of polarity and consciousness development on this planet. And I think we've forgotten how unusual, how much in extremis. This is a planet in extremis, in extremity. That it's not like the Logos or God made it or wanted it to be that way. But putting this mix of souls here leads us to how it is now. So I did a lecture called Collective Irredeemability, where I'm just putting out my opinion that the distortions, the dishonesty, the corruption of Earth humanity in every nation is far greater. It cannot be redeemed. It's beyond the point of redemption. The individual can. Individuals can, freely develop ourselves, but the collective, right? So many people are hoping, like, we've talked a bit about disclosure as the dawn of a new age of, comity between loving extraterrestrial, benevolent extraterrestrial beings and humanity. I don't think that's possible except after dimensional shift, when there won't be so many people left, meaning only those who are centered in, virtue, moral conduct, right speech, right action, right? Win-win, and are careful to do no harm and are leading with honesty and a bit of kindness. Only they remain on the planet. Then, yes, Earth will join the confederation.
So just to kind of paraphrase what you just explained there, the history of our solar system begins, or at least the most relevant part is the destruction of Maldek and the war that it was involved in around 750,000 to 500,000 years ago. That also involved Mars, was also involved in that kind of complex of wars. There were these negative Orion 4D groups that were present at that time, and a lot of the souls from Maldek or from Mars ended up on Earth deeply traumatized and went through the reincarnation process, beginning as animals and evolving up. And you have a lot of wanderers, a lot of kind of like walk-ins coming into the Earth incarnational cycle to help everyone get through those traumas, resolve those traumas. And you've mentioned these cycles of, there's a 25,000 year cycle, and 3 of those make up, I guess, a 75,000 year cycle. And so how does that pertain to like, we know, we've heard of Atlantis, we've heard of Lemuria, we've heard of Hyperborea. So if you go back far enough in human history, what were some of the earlier 75K cycles, and what happened at the beginning and the end?
Well, first of all, I have a feeling that this is the first 3D cycle on planet Earth. And so there weren't before. Ron doesn't get into that directly. It's my supposition that this is the first 3D cycle on the planet. I believe that Maldek has had many 3D cycles. I believe that Mars is younger than Maldek. I believe that Mars was actually a colony of Maldek. And in some ways, because human civilization is so significantly influenced by Martian consciousness, which is just service to self and certain tendencies. One may see that some aspects of human culture or civilization are like a colony of Mars. This is a Martian colony, that kind of thing. Not exactly, but to some degree. So you made a point about wanderers coming here to help the people. Ross said that there were 4 particular purposes for wanderers' incarnation. The first is actually to offer love light to the planet, like a kind of mobile crystal, like a portable crystal, like a little battery, temporarily in human form, radiating love light. To the degree that we've developed love light. With love means 4th chakra and light is 5. So to the degree that people are in virtue and honesty and truthfulness on, discernment, caring about truth and caring about others and self in a heart-centered way, the wanderer radiates love light to the planet. It's invisible, but it helps. It's sort of like putting another light in the dark room. The room is not as dark. Human consciousness, the field of human consciousness is a little less dark by anyone, not only wanderer, but anyone who, has made a connection between heart and head, let's say, or has opened heart to become a little bit aware of the beauty of creation and care and live in care for people and life. Not that anyone's perfect here, but the primary purpose is wanderers helping the planet. The secondary purpose is to help humans or individuals basically who cross our path. Not any social obligation. Don asked something like, what are our obligations to society? And Ross said, you don't really have any other than to live according to your values, virtue and benevolence to whatever extent one can. And helping human individuals is actually secondary. The third is to help the home group, particularly by sort of reviewing consciousness development, or sort of lessons, we can say, balance particularly, that group hadn't fully mastered or learned and integrated when they were in third density. And the final purpose is to accelerate our own soul evolution, meaning catalyst is intense here, and one can make quite significant development in a short space of 40, 60, 80 years. Ross said that the catalyst is an interesting point. The ideal lifespan, or the proper lifespan of a human being on Earth is 900 years, they said. You can yawn, it's okay,
Yeah, it's very early here.
You should yawn, it's good. I like when people sleep during my talks. Then I don't have to worry about them criticizing me. So I like to put people to sleep. It's very peaceful, right? So what was I saying? Were you listening? Was I listening?
Yes, you were talking about people coming here, the wanderers coming here for multiple purposes.
Yes. Yeah. Don was a bit surprised that wanderers don't have a preset obligation to save society or uplift society. Not that one shouldn't, and if you like, that's great. But the primary work, actually, as far as I read it, that wanderers primarily came to help the planet during this transition time, because humanity is not much centered in love light. And so the planet needs help to make the adjustment to the 4th density energy condition. That's all I could say about that. Any follow-up or about wanderers?
Yeah. Well, I actually kind of like curious about this idea that human history began 75,000 years ago. Because, people talk about it going back so much further than that, hundreds of thousands, even millions of years. And of course you're tracing that to the Martians and the Maldekians arriving on Earth. Okay, well, let's just take for argument's sake that, it all began 75,000 years ago when the Maldekians, the Martians arrived here.
It was the Martian transfer. The Martian, when Mars was sort of in the middle of its cycle, and again, 3D cycle. And I think that it was a younger civilization than Maldek, but older than humanity on Earth.
Okay.
And the transfer was made, and then the Maldek souls, some of them also got into human form.
Okay.
75,000 years ago.
All right. So the Martians arrived. The Maldekians are already here, evolving up from second density animals because they've been so traumatized. Martians arrive 75,000 years ago, and so there's that, and there's there are three of these 25,000 year cycles. So if one of the in the last 25,000 year cycle was Atlantis, were those two earlier 25,000 year cycles, were they kind of like synonymous with Lemuria, Hyperborea, and so forth?
Yeah, I mean, I think Hyperborea is Lemuria. And we talked about this notion that lots of people give different names to the same group. So Ashtar Command equals the Confederation of Planets, equals the Galactic Federation, equals the Great Right Brotherhood. As some people put it out, they don't mean white skin, they mean love light. In Buddhism, in Hinduism, their cosmology accepts a morally polarized cosmic community. There's no tradition that I'm familiar with that believes that all higher dimensional beings are positive or negative. They're both positive and negative in different groups on different planets. So in during the I have an ET Earth history page. You may want to look it up on the website. If you look at the site map, there's an ET Earth contact timeline, straight from the raw material. And it took me a long time to put it together. It could be a little refined, and there were a couple of little mistakes, but it traces, cosmology in the solar system from 750,000 years to the present. The idea is that Earth, 75,000 years ago, the population was just a few 100,000, scattered in different places. The Lemurian civilization was considered non-technological. And that's where we have Easter Island heads and the Nazca lines, both of which I believe Ra indicated were done by Orion. And that the Easter Island heads were power charged stones, like kind of where power was charged, so that early humans at that time would look at them and be in awe of power and a little bit more lean towards service self path. Ra said that Lemuria was washed under the ocean by tectonic plate adjustment by no fault of their own. So you can see even a very peaceful group gets trouble on this planet. Even there was almost no negativity on the planet, Maldek Lemuria gets wiped away or washed under the waves in the ocean. Then you have Atlantis, which was sort of beginning around 25, 30,000 years ago, something like that, and became highly technological only in the last several thousand years before its demise. So something like 15 to 10,000 before the present was the higher technological development in Maldek, in Atlantis. They too went through warfare. Ra said that it's very interesting that Atlantean souls who were positively oriented, and this is probably, there's some tie-in with Casey's material, that three groups were preserved in the disaster of Atlantis. One went to Tibet, one went to the mountains of Turkey, the other one went to the mountains of Peru, Tibet, Turkey. And the Peruvian came down as the beginnings of civilization in South America, then up through Central and North America. The Tibetan group came down to the Indian, plateau, and then you have Mohenjo-daro and the early civilizations supposed in India, 8,000 years ago. The time of Conan the Barbarian. If you want to see how life was like after Atlantis, look at Conan the Barbarian. To me, this is the way it was. Magic was afoot. Things were very barbarous, but you had real magic and a real thin veil between the physical and the astral. So things were pretty weird and quite crude and rough. So the Indian group came down, or the Tibetan group came down the Indian plateau, Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, and became the Aryan. That whole Aryan thing about India, Aryan just means noble, and in the original, that's how it's used. And they carried some of the knowledge of Atlantis, and that became some of the origin or some of the source foundation of Indian religion and spirituality. And then the group in Turkey, I assume, went somewhere into the Middle East or Central Asia. And then basically, history is the last 4,000 years or so recorded, somewhat, much more than before. But again, the way I see it is there's a steadily decreasing degree of destruction to be seen. Maldek blows up its planet, nearly 500,000 years ago or so. Mars blows off its atmosphere 75,000 years ago or so. Atlantis blows up sinks its landmass and does some heavy destruction, but the planet's okay and the atmosphere remains. So that's good. And then you have the Roman Empire and gazillion wars in the last 2,000 years. And then you have the 20th century of democide and 250, 300 million dead by government or by war. So Orion has had a lot of influence in the solar system and on the planet. And, I don't like it, but God lets it be. And so what do you say?
Yeah, well, I think it's kind of very interesting. The kind of information from the raw material about humans coming from Maldek and Mars, and what I found particularly interesting was that there was a CIA remote viewing experiment conducted, and I'll just kind of bring it up on the website so we can see it. This was a CIA approved remote viewing session where they explored the history of Mars. And look at the date, May 22nd, 1984, pretty much when the raw material came out. So I guess what happened was that the raw material came out, and I think that was probably one of the first information that, well, hey, guess what? Humans came from Mars. We were refugees from Mars, and people arrived here on giant ships or whatever. And so this remote viewing experiment was conducted in 1984 with Joseph McMoneagle, and came up with a history of Mars where it was like, as you described, as the raw material described, that it had a civilization there, and an atmosphere, and forests and animals and so forth. But then the atmosphere was vented in some kind of destruction, and a lot of the Martians had to flee. So I think it's kind of more than coincidental that this remote viewing session was done pretty much as that raw material came out. I mean, does that surprise you? Were you aware of that?
No, I wasn't aware of that. The government did take an interest in LNL research, so they were monitored. And from what I've heard from just now and then or here and there, is that the powers that be know the validity or the veracity of the raw material. And the hidden hand documents were a play on the raw material from the same sources that are opposing it.
Oh, yeah,
So
yeah. I mean, the hidden hand material, that's something that's fascinated me since it came out on the Above Top Secret forum about, what was it, 2010 or so, something like that. So, and it was based on the raw material. So, maybe you can just say a little bit about that because it describes a lot of this history, but from another perspective.
well, you may know more about hidden hand material than I do. I mean, I could just read a little of it, and I can see it's an aping of the raw material. It's aping what Rock calls aping positivity, meaning pretending to be positive. I think their basic view is, since all is one, we're negative, but we're God, and God, we're here to help you by being negative, something like that. we're helping you because we're on the negative path doing what we do. Well, yeah, of course, negativity is a great catalyst for those on the positive path seeking to develop understanding and wisdom and greater acceptance or heart awareness of what is, getting beyond our blockages. But their intention is not to help humanity. Their intention is enslavement. Don asked Ra directly, what's Orion's purpose? They said planetary conquest. That's all, planetary conquest. And I've always thought that the movie Oblivion, Tom Cruise, shows the end state Orion purpose or desired goal, which is planetary genocide, the ending of humanity as a planetary race, and the appointment of Earth as solely a resource extraction planet. So that I do believe is Orion's ultimate goal. I don't think it'll succeed, but
Okay.
yeah.
All right. So
I haven't read so much of the Hidden Hand.
Okay, so the hidden hand is really just aping the law of one material. Now they did say in that hidden hand material, and I want your take on this, is that they said that it's required by divine law that like the hidden hand material admits that we're negative polarity and we're following that negative polarity path, but it's required by divine law that we reveal the truth about who we are, and that's why we're doing this. That's why we're revealing this. That it's required that we kind of like we have to openly reveal our agenda and what we're doing, and that kind of gives you a chance in this kind of negative polarity game.
They want to help us avoid their enslavement.
I guess that's the underlying idea here, is that somehow they have all these cards they play, but they're required by divine law to reveal openly their agenda to those that they're manipulating. And I guess it's to give us a chance somehow in this lopsided contest where they have all the power and the cards, and we're trying to remember who we are.
But they don't have all the power. They don't have the power that we need for our soul evolution. We have that power by our will and free will, by mind, by attention and focus. We have the power to free ourselves more and more and see deception and lies as they are. So I mean, I just don't, negatively oriented entities don't tell the truth because they want you to gain some benefit. If they tell any truth, it's going to be, a limited hangout kind of thing. And so, absolutely, negativity is part of Logoic plan, without a doubt. It's the veil. It's the veil in 3D mind that established two paths, a negative path and a positive. Previously, there wasn't two paths. There was no negative activity long, long ago. Not on Earth, but earlier in the galaxy. So I don't really, I can't get behind any benevolence. And in terms of cosmic law, well, that's, it's a sort of yes and no, meaning, revelation of the method or externalization of the hierarchy, or it's basically what I call it is covert announcement for unrecognized assent or consent. The disclosure is made, some degree of disclosure is made for those who don't realize that not seeing it establishes consent. To some degree. To some degree. I mean, in general, the vast majority of what negative entities do will never be told. They're not going to tell you, right? So it's not that they have to tell you.
Well, that's it. I mean, that's it. They will say that we told you, but we did it in a symbolic way. So, we'll use our media resources or assets, but we kind of like put it out there in a veiled way. And if you fail to interpret it, then that's your problem.
So why do you tell me? Because you're trying to help me, or because you're just trying to minimize your karmic blowback or something?
Yeah, I guess it must be something to do with minimizing karmic blowback.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's kind of a pig's breakfast, that type of thinking. So, okay. Meaning there's a little truth there, and it's kind of confusing and confused. Negative entities, I mean, the higher the entity, the better they know how to deceive. And it seemed just to me with the hidden hand material or that type of approach, saying that, yes, we're on the negative path, but we're saying this here to help you, or we're saying this because we have to, but we don't want to help you. I mean, do you want to enslave me or not, right? Yeah. You want to help me or you want to enslave me, right? There's one or the other. You can't be a little pregnant. You are, you're not. You're trying to help me or you're not trying to help me. You're trying to control me and eat me, or you want to be my friend and help me. So you can't tell me that you're telling me about how you want to enslave me because you want to help me to be not enslaved, or make me happier while I am enslaved, or what? Because you're just trying to minimize your negative karmic, but karma doesn't work that way. Even for the negatives, it's a totally different thing. So when Ra asked Don, or Don asked Ra about anger and cancer, Ra said, for those on the positive path, if they're unable to bring acceptance and forgiveness and understanding, a kind of emotional, mental self-healing to their anger, and then dissipate the anger, if that doesn't happen, the anger gets bigger, 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 it can cause cancer, right? So that we know there's an association between anger and cancer to some degree. But for the negative path, or those on the negative path, which is not only by their it's not actually established by conscious mind decision. It's actually a sort of metaphysical condition of the higher self, or their greater being, to be on positive or negative path. And so there's something called positive or negative at base of being. It's a very subtle kind of thing. But for those on the negative path, if they're unable to vent their anger in domination, control, and successfully take power from others, then they might get cancer. And so the negatively oriented person that vents their anger and their hatred and their rage and their pain, that vents it successfully on others, doesn't get cancer, doesn't get some kind of karmic liability coming down as other people do. And so the two paths have a sort of opposite treatment of distortion and karma. In both cases, they have to be used for continued development. But for the negative path, there isn't actually any karmic blowback to being enslaving a planet, or control and domination and deception and all their evil and trickery and all what they do. There isn't a bad karma for it. Really? Now,
I mean, I find that hard to believe. I mean, I imagine the negative race, like these 4D Orions or reptilians, whatever the negative group you want to call it, that they would want to minimize their karmic blowback by making it look like it's the victim's fault that they are suffering all of these injustices.
Right. We told you what we were going to do to you.
Exactly.
You wear a snake, and you should have known. You took in the snake, and he bit you, and it's your fault. because he bit you, we bit you, I bit you, and it's your fault because I'm just a snake. What can I do? So this is all silly talk, actually, in my view. It's just pablum. It's nothing. So, but the idea, and I don't like it. I'm on the same type of aghast position as you may be in. I think it's unpleasant, but the parameters of the negative path are basically sort of diametrically opposed in terms of what's called the efficient use of catalyst, which means how you deal with your life, how you meet your life, your body process, mind process, psychology, friends, family, relationship situations, opportunities, past, present, future, everything. How you deal with that is a degree of efficient use of catalyst. And for the positive and for the negative, the efficiency is diametrically opposed. In the positive path, it's about acceptance, understanding, forgiveness, and bringing that into greater love wisdom, which means greater acceptance of open heart to what is, and discernment and balance, awareness of the perfection of all, right? Complete and whole and perfect, Ra talks about as a awareness of higher self. For the negative, and you bringing catalyst, or bringing our catalyst to those qualities of love wisdom, is an efficient use of catalyst, which does not make karmic load. Not being able to do that can make sickness, can make all sorts of trouble. Ra said, catalyst not used by mind and spirit is given to body, meaning becomes bodily symptomology or pathology. For the negative path, it's the opposite way. Their efficient use of catalyst is more self-discipline, more self-control, more control of others, more skill in deception and trickery and the use of force and threat and stratagem to gain more power endlessly. And if they do that, that's called the efficient use of catalyst. And that's why with big anger, they won't get cancer, if that's really the case. So for the agents listening, you better be sure your higher self is on the negative path. Otherwise, you are indeed creating a big boatload of negative karma, doing negative activity, lying, deceiving, cheating, ops, endless psyops. So,
yeah, I just in the Law of One material, it did describe how individuals have that choice of evolving, whether the positive path or the negative path. 51% service to other, or 95% service to self. Does that also apply to collectives? Like, would the Orion group, would they be on a kind of negative polarity path where they have to achieve 95% of like evil, bad deeds?
Yeah, it's an individual it's assessed individually. Our assessments are made individually. One by one, souls graduate or don't from their density, or from any density, actually. 51% service to other basically means a little bit more than not that person on the positive path, or the person who's seeking that 4D, 4 density, kingdom of heaven on earth, basically. Seeking the best for all, that's all. A little bit more than being selfish and stuck. I'm a little bit clear and seeking to learn and grow and help. And the negative, 95% service self, that's also a figure applied to the individual. So Orion would be 4D negative group, composed of 4D negatively oriented individual souls, all of whom got there by that 95% or near perfect negative polarization, self-control. The negative path is all about control. So first they have to throttle their mind, then they need to throttle others. That's the way it's done. First you have to clamp down on any lack of discipline in the apparent self. And then you have to totally vent that in, masterly clamping down on others' freedom, robbing them, ... Hitting 95% is done by the individual. 51% positive is done by the individual. But Orion is 4D negative, and Confederation is 4, 5, 6 dimensional positive. And Wanderers likewise are 4th and 5th, 6th density positive souls are from those groups. Does that make that clear, or were you not sure about something?
No, that's good. Thank you. So Well, I wanted to ask you about Akhenaten because he's described in the Law of One material as a pivotal figure in the kind of rising planetary consciousness of the Law of One. So, you want to tell us about Akhenaten and his teachings and how he was really the first to promote the Law of One?
Well, yeah, I mean, law of one is another word, another phrase for monotheism. God with a capital G, not pantheism or animism. The idea that there's a single source, or all life, physical, non-physical, has a single source and is ultimately of the nature, essentially, of its single source called God or one infinite creator or intelligent infinity. Akhenaten simply was aware of unity and wanted to bring the people of his time from worshiping the many gods to worshiping the one, which is it brings a certain kind of integration to mind, where meaning it's aligned, it's more aligned with soul purpose than worshiping many deities for many different purposes, which is just sort of transactional, seeking to get something. But there's the hymn to the sun, very famous poem written by Akhenaten, is expressing his love of sun as the face of the one infinite or the one God that created all, and that source, recognizing the single source of all, that is infinite and gives us life, the life-sustaining, life-generating, creative source of benevolence, the benevolent that creates all. Unfortunately, Akhenaten got into big trouble with the negative entities already established, the priests of Re and all that. And this is the beginning. I haven't looked into this for a number of years, but this is the beginning of the mystery schools. That's why they trace all back to Egypt, actually. And there's even some discussion about Akhenaten being Moses, or Moses and Akhenaten as one. The stories are similar. So there's a lot of hanky-panky in the histories, 1000, 2000 BCE. And so 18th dynasty and all that. My understanding is that Akhenaten was a wanderer, and his father, Amenhotep, was also a wanderer. It was actually a special group of sixth density souls that came in to do that work. There was a whole bunch of people came in for that. I'm familiar with that. David, David Wilcock, who's a friend. I like David. May well have been Edgar Casey. This is very reasonable. I'm not a woo kind of guy, but it's very reasonable that he was. He certainly looks exactly like him in some ways. And David had something to do with Egypt also, as I did, and some of us, some other folks I know. And so a certain group of sixth density wanderers came in to help humanity appreciate unity, to open heart more, to sort of strengthen faith. There's a difference between praying to many spirits and entities, gods with a small lowercase g, praying to the many gods for this and that, versus kind of gratitude, thanksgiving, to the one source of all. There is the Ra talks about contact with intelligent infinity, which is associated with seventh chakra, which comes from 6 to 7. And so 6 is called the gateway to intelligent infinity, and also access to intelligent energy, or etheric energy, or prana, or power. That an experience of contact with intelligent infinity, like an enlightenment experience, unity, no self, bliss, unspeakable joy, reveals the hallowed or consecrate nature of everyday experience. The hallowed or consecrate nature of everyday phenomena or of what's considered ordinary. That nothing is ordinary. When 7 chakra is activated, or the 6-7, and this is, getting closer to understanding purpose of human incarnation and soul evolution, or the end of the path. The hallowed or consecrate nature of what's taken as ordinary. Akhenaten knew that. Akhenaten had some contact with intelligent infinity, meaning Akhenaten was, an enlightened fellow, not finished with the path, but he was aware of the hallowed or consecrate, all God. Everywhere I look, I see God, I see sacred, all sacred, like that, which the negatives have no idea about and would really don't like. So the joy of creation as a sacred play of light or phenomenon. This is well known in higher dimensional positive groups. And Akhenaten it was his first time in, I believe. So some of my understanding of Akhenaten, which is, speculative and no proof and just an opinion, is that it was his first time in and he was traumatized. And he had a terrible situation, his family was brutally murdered, as far as I understand, by the evil priests of Re. And that's a certain kind of conflict was established right there about 3,500 years ago or 2,500 years ago. I guess 3,500. So 1,000 to 2,000 BC, or BCE. So Akhenaten was an important person to help remind humanity that all the many's of one source, and that appreciating the source of all brings us, puts us in touch with sanctity, holy, holiness. I mean, those are kind of, religious type words, but one can have, some people have had, bliss experiences or non-dual experiences. Akhenaten knew that for himself. So he was a very spiritually evolved fellow, and probably towards the end of sixth density. And the souls around him came in that way. A whole bunch of us came in at that time.
So Akhenaten, at that time, I mean, you mentioned his family being killed by the evil priests who presumably were working with the Orion collective, and the predominant belief system at the time was kind of like open worship of the gods, where individual gods were kind of like for their characteristics and qualities were worshipped, and they wanted it that way. And Akhenaten comes in and he kind of like starts teaching about intelligent infinity and how to connect with that, and so that was the conflict, and that's why he had such a difficult time. But he was genuinely a positive being, because I know there are some that say the opposite. They say, "Oh, well, Akhenaten, he was the one that promoted monotheism and Yahweh, and he's bad is because So,
monotheism is not Yahweh, of course. Monotheism means one source above the many, or that the many is of one source and its nature is one. That's not Yahweh. And so there are people who say the raw material is, Ra is some kind of evil space alien god. These are throwaway comments that mean nothing from people who don't want to look at the details of the teaching. Look at the details. And some people say the raw material was a government operation. Some people have said that.
Mm-hmm.
So, self is a being of infinite worth came from the CIA. Really? Well, then you have some pretty awakened fellows there. There's some great teachings, complete and whole and perfect, and know yourself, accept yourself, become the creator, and acceptance of self, forgiveness of self, direction of the will, the way to the disciplined or way to the magical personality, the way to awakening. These are straightforward, holistic teachings. So there are a lot of people who, can't see, a teaching that's trying to help. There's no control. There's nobody controlling anybody. Nobody say, the raw material is not about Ra, pray to the god Ra. And I just think there's too much fascination with what Ra would call transient information. We talked about this before the interview.
Mm-hmm.
Many of these things are irrelevant. It's important to focus on what you take with you. They say you can't take it with you, right? Money, possessions, many aspects of human incarnation. However, you take you with you, and mind and awareness and the tendencies we've developed, we take with us, and the karmic load or the binding or freeing we've done, how much we've learned and grown and helped others, helped self and other, developed acceptance and discernment and awareness and balance, that we take with us. And I think the Confederation is like a monastic organization. It's not like a military organization. The military doesn't control the ashram. The Satguru controls the ashram, and so creation is much more ashramic than it is military organizational. This is an important point, I think, actually.
Okay, well, let's kind of like get a little bit more into, what is the Confederation? I mean, you mentioned it being kind of more like an ashramic organization. I take that to be an organization that's much more focused on spiritual development, on achieving high degrees of kind of like service to other. Whereas there are these other organizations, presumably light organizations, and actually, like you to describe that there's supposedly an organization called the Galactic Federation of Worlds. Some call it the Galactic Federation of Light, but it is a kind of more military-oriented organization where you have a hierarchy, admirals, warrior soldiers, and so forth, fighting the good fight against the bad guys. So what do you think of that? Is there truly a kind of positive extraterrestrial organization out there that's kind of military oriented, as opposed to the Confederation of Planets, which is more spiritually oriented?
I don't think so. I don't think there's any militarism or militancy in the Confederation, or in the assemblage of positively oriented planetary groups. So whatever name you want to give to the title to the organization, Ra indicated that this is a local confederation. I have a series on the playlist on YouTube called Our Confederation of Planets, and goes in depth about all that Ra taught in my own opinions and views about the local confederation. That it's about, like 50 planets or something, or I don't forget all the numbers, but dozens, basically committed to supporting their own planetary evolution, and that of other groups that call for help. They don't push themselves on anyone. They wait for the call. Ra said, unlike Orion, we of the Confederation wait for the calling. So call and response, meaning don't call yourself to service. It's potentially infringing on others' free will to push that on them that they're not requesting despite our intentions to help. So personally, I've had many out-of-body experiences, and I can't prove that. The one I've never had any shadow of militarism or aggression or that type of red ray or aggression has always been a negative contact, meaning associated with some degree of violation. And the positive contacts I've had, they're all associated with helping learn, grow, and help. They're associated with soul evolution. No military admirals and generals in Ashtar Command, yes, sir. There is balancing to Orion. And we talked about this last time. Ra indicated that 4D positive Confederation groups, meaning 4D positive groups, in this area do a certain kind of neutralizing activity that limits Orion influence on humanity, but doesn't stop it. It just limits it. And Don asked Ra, why not 5 and 6 fifth density, 6th density Confederation groups? And Ra said, only the 4th density group lacks the wisdom to refrain from the battle. So with wisdom, 5th chakra, 5th density group, with greater awareness of unity, 6th density, 6th chakra, there is no desire to fight. They do other forms of service. Are there some 4D positive group like the Palladians and Billy Meyer and all that, right? Personally, I think that was a real contact with Billy Meyer, though it's complicated. Maybe they had a certain type of militarist edge or something, but not too much. So, no, I think that's a human overlay, frankly.
Yeah, because I mean that's very popular at the moment, as maybe you're aware of, that there's a lot of people out there saying that there's this galactic federation of worlds that has fleets of powerful starships that go out there and fight the good fight against the Draco Alliance, against the Orion Collective, and it's all about using power or rays or particle beam weapons, or fighting that way, mano a mano with warriors and all of that. But according to the Ra material, that's not how the fight is done.
Yes.
that 50 beings, that they, rather than kind of like using starships and going, full Star Wars battle against the negative forces, that they're doing it in another way, maybe manipulating time or something, or putting ideas into people, making a commander kind of like forget about what his orders were, and so
like the Russian submariner who refused the order to nuke in the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Right, exactly.
I would be quite unsurprised if, in fact, Confederation entities were not in that fellow's mind, assisting him to decide not to obey the order and not to deploy that weapon. So many, many things are done like that are there are countless subtle acts of protection and restoration of balance that positive entities or higher dimensional groups do. Now, I don't know everything, but it's simply that the groups that I've heard about, there's a French movie called La Belle Verte, The Beautiful Green. Very interesting. You can find it on BitChute. There is the discussion, there is a book called No Solar in Portuguese, Chico Francisco Javier, Spiritist tradition, also called Astral City or Our Home. I did a long series on the playlist of Astral City. That book, talking about the channel's spirit guide's last lifetime, going up to an upper astral city. It seems that the control, the limiting, putting limits on negativity is done at a higher level than the Confederation. Not, it's sort of like let God dispense karmic retribution. It's not your job. So there is limitation to the negatives. It's less than I would hope for, but I don't think that the Confederation, I think it's done at a level above the Confederation in ways that are not mano a mano particularly. But there may be some aspects of, there's a real spectrum of consciousness, even among groups of the same dimensional level that are positive or negative. Particularly positive, there are some groups that know less than I would think they should know. There are Buddhist teachers who know more than some people in 4D positive groups on 4D positive planets. So the universe is not top down. It's not fully controlled. I mean, the metaphysics of dimensional stability that planets keep in their orbit and the dimensional levels maintained for beings' experience, these are very subtle matters above the Confederation. And the Confederation, there's a real wide range of activity. So there may be some groups that are, doing some kind of technology transfer, positive group. I mean, like Tesla, the real Tesla, not Musk's thing. Nikola Tesla was considered a wanderer in raw material, came here to bring free energy so that humanity would not have to work for money to pay for energy, that humanity would have more leisure time, free time, just like that. How naive, profoundly naive. And so the technology transfers are done from positive groups. I just haven't seen, frankly, any evidence of militarist tendencies in any of the positive contacts I've had, and any of my contacts with teachers in this world, meaning sources of spiritual guidance. They are surprisingly sort of dismissive of negativity, in the sense that it's sort of like, let them do their thing. You're not here to fight them. You're here to save yourself and help others around you. So I'm not saying what people should or shouldn't do, but I'm just saying I don't see any evidence whatsoever of militarist tendencies in a affiliated, confederation or a group of multiple fourth, fifth, sixth density positively oriented planets. I just don't think militarism is their thing at all. So I think that there's some distortion in the current views.
Well, that's a very interesting question, because I do know that the Ashtar Command is probably the oldest of the organizations that has been discussed at length, because of George Van Tassel. He wrote the first book describing the Ashtar Command in the 1950s, and he actually got a message from the Ashtar Command to write to the US Air Force, complaining about their development of nuclear missiles. So that's from the 50s, and they were described as a kind of military style organization. So that's been around for a long time.
There's a difference between highly organized and militaristic. The military is highly organized and hierarchical, and militaristic, or associated with shooting and killing and other things like that. A monastery is highly regulated, structured, and hierarchical, but not militaristic. And I think that, everybody who's channeling, pretty much, or almost all that are conscious channels, where they're just sitting there and talking, get mixed in with their personal biases. What they say gets mixed in. Ashtar Command, was the earliest term for a organization of higher dimensional benevolent planets. Then all these other terms came in. That they are highly organized or structured, disciplined, and hierarchical not based on domination, but based on greater soul evolution. And so like the Buddhist Sangha, the early Buddhist Sangha, was a monarchy, was a autocratic system. Well, there was one guy and everybody followed, and there was no, it was not a democracy. Gautama the Buddha made the decisions, and you followed if you stayed, and if you didn't like, you leave. But it wasn't militaristic. There were rules and order and structure, and a hierarchy of those that are senior and those that are junior. And everybody knew, but it was basically a hierarchy of virtue and wisdom, a hierarchy established by soul maturity, spiritual maturity. So that may be comparable to military organization, but in terms of struggling with any other beings, I just think that if it is in the Confederation, it's a minor portion of some fourth density group's activity. Well, and I don't think it looks like Star Wars and the shooting lasers and things.
Yeah, well, just to kind of pursue that idea that in kind of spiritual orders, you can also get a kind of military mindset coming in. Like I think of the Rishi kings of India, like the Shaolin monks that practice martial arts. You know, the concept of Jedi's in the Star Wars series or Jedi Knights. So is there that kind of like I don't know, third way where you actually can have the spiritual developed alongside a very kind of highly disciplined military style training to defend or protect others that need it?
Um, yeah, well, of course there are some, the Shaolin monk way or Chinese, other martial arts. um, the more, there's sort of different gradients of soul evolution. There's something called the adept path, which is basically a path of high discipline, um, extensive study, meditation, practice. And the practice or the techniques of meditation are many. And that person is trying to break through to greater realization, freedom, and powers as soon as possible, as fast as they can. Their extremely high discipline is required. At the higher levels of meditation path in any organization, at least Buddhist, Hindu, Taoist, extreme discipline is required, because achieving complete perfect enlightenment in a human flesh body is actually a big deal. It's not easily done at all. We're talking about 7 chakra perfection. So high discipline is basically disciplining yourself. Now, in terms of going around and protecting others, yes, that is done, absolutely. I think it's done by some. I mean, there's a lot going on. It's not that every group follows the same way. If you see the movie La Belle Verte, you see what I think looks like an early 4D positive civilization. They spend their time doing acrobatics, jumping around on trees, and they all love each other, and it's the most idyllic life. They sleep in hollows in the meadows. And I mean, it's just fiction movie, right? But there are groups that are extremely pacifistic. And then there are others that are much more disciplined and structured. Depends on the love-wisdom balance, the yin-yang balance. So while there is high discipline for those that are, more advanced and also here seeking greater development as soon as possible, rapidly, discipline is required. What makes it military? It's discipline, it's hierarchy, its structure, its organization. Is that military? No. There are many types of organization that are hierarchical and highly disciplined. So the Buddhist Sangha, the Hindu Sanghas, many of them would be, in India, at least traditionally, highly disciplined, highly structured, hierarchical. Who's the boss, and he's not the boss beating people. He's in the boss because he's mind, soul, spirit development is greater than anyone else there. And everybody recognizes that, and they want him to be, leading the organization. So is that military? No, it's just highly organized and disciplined and structured. So I think, yes, confederation groups can be that way. Depends on the level, depends on the group. But again, there may be some kind of battling of good and evil with vimanas and laser weaponry. It's not my specialty, so not my department.
Okay, all right. Well, the raw material, it has. It's very clear that the Don Elkins was asking a lot of questions about cosmology, about kind of like extraterrestrials and their influence in human affairs. But Ra was kind of saying that such questions were trivial. What was more important was soul evolution rather than cosmology. So, yeah. So, can you just explain exactly what it was that Ra was trying to emphasize?
Well, Ra, The purpose of the raw material, you can say, is to share teaching on the law of one. Yes, and the way that's done is a focus upon the principles of soul evolution, not the specifics of cosmology or planetary history, not the specifics of what groups are doing what activities and how life is like for them, but the principles by which we can evolve ourselves most efficiently. And they said something like, we're giving you a different take on information that's ever and always the same, meaning the way of mind, body, spirit transformation. And they said that what was important is their weighting, W-E-I-G-H-T, how they weigh their weighting of different teachings. And teaching principles is considered heavier or has a greater gravity and value than cosmology. In Buddhism, Gautama Buddha directly said that there were 4 topics that were considered imponderable, inconceivable, and if you spend too much time looking into them, you'll be in vexation, meaning don't spend too much time. When you're free, you'll know what's up and you don't have to worry about it. One was cosmology, and the other one was the power of a Buddha. Another one was karma, karmic law. So we talk a lot about karma. I talk a lot about cosmology. And then the 4th was the power of the trances, or mind's power in higher states. So cosmology is sort of the structure of creation. The structure of creation is established for the purpose of creation. It isn't, the cosmology, cosmogenesis, the generation of light and octaves of dimensions and planets and star systems and different levels of groups and consciousness and all that, that's established for a purpose. And the purpose is soul evolution, or the development of light, or that beings in this 7-dimensional system, or in the creation, multidimensional creation, becomes free of its limitations and knows itself and returns to source. That's called soul evolution, and the goal. That the principles by which we can do that was the primary purpose of the raw material in giving the law of one. It's the law of one for the purpose of focus on the principles of soul evolution. And so, and they're saying, don't be concerned with that which, is born and dies, or is of the season, like the grass that grows, but focusing on the eternal principles. And this is basically saying that this group of extraterrestrials, which is almost finished with their soul evolution, they say that they're almost out of 6th density, and when they leave that, will leave the reincarnative scheme that we're part of. They say, Ross said, they're like 2 billion with a B, 2 billion years older than Earth humanity. So knowing life purpose is more important than knowing the details of cosmic structure, but cosmic structure is for the purpose of soul evolution. And soul evolution means the evolution of all beings. And Ross said, the purpose of incarnation, directly, anywhere, in any dimension, the purpose of incarnation is evolution of mind, body, spirit. The purpose of 3rd density is to learn the ways of love. The ways of love are associated with heart chakra. And it's not simply, I love you, I love you. It's actually an unconditional acceptance and a rigorous commitment to honesty and kindness and harmlessness. And it doesn't mean be a martyr and sacrifice necessarily. It's fine, but it's not requiring sacrifice. It's requiring an awareness, some basic awareness that what goes around comes around, and all is one, and you get what you're given. You'll be getting what you're giving. Do good, get good. Do harm, get harm. This is like karmic law. So When I wrote, I compiled 55-page PDF called Healing and Balance. Maybe we can look at that next time if we do another interview. It's called The Principles of Healing and Balance. There's another playlist about, many dozen talks on healing and balance. I did that about 20 years ago, alone in my room in San Francisco, knowing that nobody wanted it then, and knowing yet I felt some obligation to complete it. And it's basically a 55-page or 50-page PDF in a dozen chapters, pulling out essential spiritual teachings from the raw material about chakras, about higher self, about karma, about reincarnation, about healing and balance, lower triad blockage and unblocking or clearing chakra blockage, contact intelligent infinity, upward spiraling light, kundalini, the whole thing. And I felt that was a very important work to have done. I'm glad I did it, even if few people can appreciate it, because the heart of the raw material is the emphasis on the principles of soul evolution. And they're really saying you should know who you are and why you're here, and continue fulfilling life purpose. And that's core and key. And if that's an elder extraterrestrial group, sixth density, late sixth density, I'd rather take my cue and my lead from them than any militaristic fourth density group.
Well, I guess this kind of like brings us back to this fundamental question that many people have, especially those watching this. Many of them are aware of the extent to which these negative extraterrestrial alliances are doing things. And so I guess many people are very interested in opposing that, and one way of doing that is to promote awareness, tell others about, look at all these things that the dark forces, the Orion groups, the Draco groups, and all of that are doing, and then Earth minions who are corrupt and don't care about people. But on the other hand, there's the soul evolution, which is all about practicing loving kindness, forgiveness, and so forth. How do you kind of reconcile that? Because on the one hand, it's almost like, okay, there's evil, you got to expose it, you got to oppose it. But on the other hand, it's all about forgiveness, love, kindness.
It's not you gotta do. It's not you gotta. You gotta find your own way. You gotta be true to yourself. That's what I think we gotta be. You don't gotta oppose evil. You gotta be true to your deeper values of what you truly know is important and critical for you. Authenticity and honoring what you are and what's essential. Core needs, we can say. If that means exposing negatives, then go ahead. I've talked about negatives a hell of a lot. I don't want to go out into the public square in a soapbox or, try to expose this and that and do more and more. That's just not fulfilling for me. But if it's fulfilling and meaningful for someone, then it's a part of their path of soul evolution. It's a part of their learning and growing. If you're speaking truth, that's great. If you're really helping, that's great. If you're really helping people free themselves, that's great. Fritz Springmeier, great work, freeing people who've been controlled. A lot of people like that. So if that's one's calling, okay, be true to your sense of deep calling, your sense of true purpose. But there are other purposes and other ways of living true to in line with life purpose, other than opposing evil. That's all. And service to self is unfortunately a confusing term. The monk in the cave doing meditation would be considered on the path of service to other, though they're in solitude. So there's a little problem there. And the positive path is not really strictly relational, meaning being of service to others is great and necessary or comes naturally. But one can develop quite thoroughly without making a public situation out of teaching and helping. So I would say that people should be true to themselves. And if they feel that exposing negatives and doing their thing, opposing, doing whatever they believe is right and true and good, then that's great. And other people have other ways of learning and growing.
Okay, that's an excellent answer. So I think we should wrap it up. I mean, that's your website, scottmandelker.com. So anything you want to say in finishing up and recommending people if they want to dive deeper into some of the things that you've been talking about?
Well, I would just say go to particularly the YouTube channel, which is TWS Mandelker, like Talks with Scott Mandelker. Yeah, that's one of the playlists. And look through if anything's interesting. You know, there are about 1,200 talks in about 24 playlists. Lots of beautiful wisdom that I found that I'm sharing or talking about, and it's free and it's interesting. Otherwise, I would just say be true to yourself. You know, authenticity. I've done some talks recently on authenticity. And it's basically congruence in many ways between how you live and how you think and who you are and what you are and what's essential. Congruence between what's essential and how I live. I'm no saint, but I believe in that type of authenticity. To thine own self be true, and by that one also is happy to be beneficial or kindly to others, and not a troublemaker. Authenticity and congruence between the conscious sense of self and true nature, as much as we can. And there, of course, meditation is really, really valuable. So that's all I'd say.
I want to thank you, Scott, for sharing your wisdom and expertise on the Law of One. It's very helpful. I think it's a very important body of work, and I'm so glad that you're here to help us navigate it, because it is a vast body of work. And you've put out so much material, so I recommend people go to your website, YouTube channel, over 1,200 videos there, so quite a lot to dig through. So thank you, Scott, for everything you've been doing.
Thank you too, Michael. I appreciate it. See you again.
You have been listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Join or start a conversation in the comments. Take the time to explore the vast library of best-selling books, webinars, and podcasts by Dr. Salla. Visit exopoliticstoday.com.